This is the Real Estate Investing 365 podcast, your go-to source for real estate investing strategies so you can start living the life you want and get where you want to go. With your host, Justin Hanna.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Investing 365. Today I got on here my buddy David Pere. Is it Pere? Pere?
Yeah, something like that. Peer, whatever.
The military millionaire. You guys might know him from his podcast. He's got all kinds of stuff out there, books coming out. He's been on Bigger Pockets, got a lot of stuff going on. So what's up, David? Thanks for being here, man.
What's up, dude? It's good to have you. We haven't talked in, I don't know, a couple, but we talk, but it's good to see you again.
A little bit of chit chat back and forth. We're both in like a kind of a mastermind thing together, and I'm always following his Instagram page because he does so many sweet TikToks. You know, I actually just got started on TikTok. I downloaded it like a year ago, and I was like, I'm not going to do this stupid thing, and so I just got it, and I put like 3 videos on there, and I'm like, I need to figure this out a little bit better because these are horrible.
The cringe is real, my friend. I'll record, like, I'll get myself all hyped up and do like 3 or 4 videos. And then I'll be like, I fucking hate this platform, and I'll leave it alone. But I don't hate the platform because I get sucked into it for like hours. You know, if I open TikTok, like sitting in the bathroom, it's like, it's worse than a newspaper.
I'm trying to avoid it. I'm trying to just use it for my own little post videos, but I'm like, man, I can't like afford to waste any more time on social media because I get sucked in. Oh man. Well, David here, he's in the Marine Corps. I think he lives in San Diego now, but he does most of his investing out of state, I believe in Missouri. And he was on here early on in the podcast. I think he might've been like episode 2 or 3 or something like that. Way back in the beginning. So for everybody that doesn't know you and didn't hear your first one, give kind of a rundown of who you are, what you're doing in real estate, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm David, whatever. I joined the Marine Corps in 2008, and because I, typical guy reasons, right? I didn't know what I wanted to study at school. I didn't have money, and I wanted to leave the freaking state. So I was like, I'm gonna go do awesome things. Let me join the Marine Corps. This will be an adventure, and it has been. I've been stationed kind of all over, Japan, San Diego, Missouri, Hawaii, back to San Diego. And then obviously I've spent a ton of time in other countries, not a ton of time, but, relatively a lot of time in other countries doing random things throughout that time, including one tour in Afghanistan. So I guess that was probably a ton of time. At least it felt, time seemed to drag on while you're there, living there. But so I did some fun stuff in the Marine Corps. I loved it. I re-enlisted, stayed in. I'm at, 12 and a half years. And then in 2015, I was a recruiter in Springfield, Missouri, and a buddy of mine he was trying to get me into Amway to sell, multi-level marketing, pyramid stuff, whatever. And so he gave me the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I was like, dude, I don't read, like, not my thing. And he literally pulled a CD out of his pocket and was like, well, how about you just listen to this? I'm like, fine, he got me. So I listened to it, and then I downloaded Audible, and then I listened to like the entire Purple Library, Rich Dad, Poor Dad stuff. And then I stumbled upon, what I found is what I would do is I would, I'd be listening and I'd go, I don't know what that is. And I would Google, what is this? And what is that? How do I whatever. And Bigger Pockets just kept popping up on Google to the point where finally I was like, all right, I'm just going to go in this Bigger Pockets website and just type it into their search bar because it's probably got the answer. So then I stumbled upon all of Brandon Turner's books, and I kind of got sucked into that world. And, I wish that there was like a way for me to see, when I had gotten that original book, but I think it might've been 3 months, maybe 3-4 months. But it was like fall of that year when I got handed that book, and I closed on my first duplex December 28th. So somewhere in 3-4 month range, what happened was like the stars aligned. I was like, okay, my apartment lease is coming due. I totaled a Harley. I wasn't on it. It was parked and someone parked on top of it. But I had my Harley totaled, and the guy was drinking and owned a car dealership. So rather than having it hit his insurance, he paid me, a pretty decent chunk in cash, basically the value of the bike in cash. And then I went to Harley and sold the remains of the bike to them. So I basically broke even on when I originally purchased it, like 3 or 4 years ago or prior. And so I had some cash, and then I was like, okay, I'm paying $550 a month for this apartment. Let me see if I can find somewhere where I can live for $550 a month and buy one of these duplexes. And I found a duplex where my mortgage was 615, but the tenant was renting for 475. And I was like, all right. So I moved in, and then almost immediately got orders to Hawaii and got married, and was like, all right, well, that was fun, and moved. I mean, I might have been occupying the duplex for like 3 months, and then I got orders, moved to Hawaii, and I didn't know that was happening at the time, but I got to leave recruiting a little bit early. Anyway,
which is perfect because you probably used a VA loan or something like that to where you were able to, or whatever loan it was, but you didn't have to stay in it for the time because it's like a legitimate reason that you had to move away.
Yeah. So I did FHA. It's one of my biggest, not regrets, but yeah, I got talked out of the VA loan by a lender who supposedly was a VA lender, but didn't know how to, like, he told me you could only use a VA loan once, which is false. So, it just kind of fed into later in the story where now that's kind of what I do is help people with the VA loan because nobody knows how to use it. And it's incredible. So yeah, I did the FHA. And then, instead of having to occupy this thing for a year, I got orders to move. So I did. And then it was rented, and I was like, wow, that's cool. It was an FHA loan on an $81,000 duplex, I think, plus flooring that I put in and some touch-ups. I think I was all into this thing for like $4,500, and and some sweat equity, painting a deck myself and whatnot. And here it was now that I'm moved out, and it's cash flowing $200-300 a month. And so, and then now it's a little bit higher than that, but it basically was like 100%, cash on cash return, or probably 90% cash on cash return that first year. And then I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like there's something to this. And that was, a fairly decent duplex. It's like 25 years old, had a new roof. I mean, it was in good shape. There was nothing really crazy with it. And then I just kind of went from there. So from there, I had the duplex. I bought 5 acres of farmland, which wasn't really an investment, but it was next door to my house. So I wanted 10 acres instead. Anyway, my wife had a house. We pulled a HELOC on it, bought a 10 unit, it just kind of went from there. At this point, I'm at, I don't even know, I think 19 actual rentals. And then I've closed because of the new marketing thing. I've got 1 that I closed last week that I'm going to flip, 2 that I closed Monday, and then 2 in the pipe for the next week or 2. Some wholesale, 1 legitimate flip. And then I'll probably hold 1 of them. And then I've also done a partner on a syndication. So, I'm not one of those guys who's grown to like 300 units in a couple of years, because what I was doing is I would just kind of turn the marketing funnel on whenever I wanted a deal, and I'd go like, oh, let me go look for deals. And, that changed about 3 months ago. I started like, okay, I'm getting out of the Marine Corps because I've effectively I'm basically hit the financial independence like numbers to where I'm like, all right, I've replaced my income. It's time to move on. And through real estate and my business online or whatever. And so now I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to get out. I'm going to go home. Let me take this real estate thing full time. And so I joined Ryan's program where you and I both reside. And I cranked the marketing full time and was like, no matter what, I'm going to run some marketing. And yeah, the first set of mailers, between that and some texting, I've landed 5 deals as of the first month of 2021. I'm like, oh, all right, time to crank this gun up, because some of them, like there's one that I'm wholesaling to a friend. I'm going to make like $5,000. So whatever. But there's one that I close on Monday and I've already got a buyer lined up, and I'm going to make a pretty decent at like 17, I think 16, 17. I mean, depending on closing fees, but probably like 16 off it. And the other ones are somewhere in the middle. So it's been a pretty decent, like kind of eye-opening, like, man, what was I doing all this time not cranking this up? So anyway, so that's the way too long story about my real estate journey, I suppose, at this point.
Yeah, no, that's totally cool. And me and you are kind of in the same boat to where, I got started in real estate before you, but I definitely didn't, blow up and explode and go so crazy. But it's because it's hard. We have to kind of avoid judging ourselves against other people that are doing so much more, because everybody's got their own things going on in life. You know what I mean? Like, I had 4 kids and, moved a couple times personally. So I was trying to do small things on the side, and it's just working all the time. It's kind of like you being in the Marine Corps, you're like getting ordered to different places and all this stuff that, no matter what, as long as you're taking some small steps going forward, hey, we're still all moving forward. Might not be as fast as somebody, but guaranteed there's people out there when you got started and when I got started that was talking about it, that's still talking about it and hasn't done anything. Right. So we're better off than a lot and not as good off as some, but it's okay. We're all moving in the same direction. And it's funny what you mentioned about the Rich Dad Poor Dad. You kind of just like jumped in and just started listening to all the books and then really researching it. I was the same way. I listened to that Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I remember specifically one of the things he said to do was just start listening to increase your financial literacy, right? So in my work truck, because I was working 7 days a week at the time, all the time, being a lineman, I would just tune the radio to Fox Business, CNBC, like any talk news radio that had to do with business, just so I could start learning like the lingo. And I had no idea what they're talking about. Probably took me 2 years to really understand any of it. But just taking those little steps to where we're learning like rate of returns, return on investment, like what certain stock phrases are, whatever, what's happening in the market, the prime rate. You'll just learn that stuff over time if you just start listening to it, which is good advice. So you got started really quickly. You said you were stationed there in Springfield as a recruiter. Is that where you're from, in that area?
I grew up in Arkansas, so I grew up in Little Rock, so like 3.5, 4 hours south, probably 3 if I'm driving. So not close enough, I guess, that area, but there's similar markets. Little Rock obviously being a primary market in Arkansas, and Springfield a tertiary, but they're not like super far apart in demographics or sizes. And so it's kind of similar. And then I had been to Springfield a lot as a kid. Like I went to Boy Scout camp up in like north of Springfield. I'd visited the Bass Pro up there 2 or 3 times. Actually road tripped with my good friend Steven when we were like seniors in high school, when we were like 17 and 18, and we did this road trip, and Springfield was where we stopped, and we tried to like go clubbing, and one of us couldn't get in. And then, so I had some interesting memories of Springfield as a kid. And so when I got stationed there, it was cool. And the reason I kind of stuck with the market is, well, twofold, I guess. One, I was familiar with the market, and then 2, I met my wife out there, and she owned a house, she has family. Like we just kind of figured that was a place to go back to. There's nothing uniquely special about that market. It's just, I don't know, your typical Midwest, like no appreciation, decent cash flow, slow town. And, I was like, okay, this is cool. So
yeah. I didn't know you were from Arkansas, actually. I don't know why I didn't know that, but have you ever heard of, what's it called? Like outside of Fort Smith, Mountainburg? Mountainburg, Arkansas. Oh, I have a bunch of family. I guess most of them are dead now, but that's where like my old dad's side of the family's from. And it's like backwoods Arkansas, like there's still houses there with dirt floors or like plywood floors, and way back in the middle of nowhere, dirt roads going for 2 hours to their houses. And I would go out there when I was a kid, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Because I'd have to go visit my grandpa, and work on the farm. And
don't judge the rest of the state, but I love Arkansas. It's beautiful.
No, it's actually pretty cool. And then what I was getting at is, then I went out there as a guy got older, because my grandpa died, and I went to his funeral, and I stayed in the city more, and I like started exploring. And I was telling my wife, because she went with me, and I was like, I hated it out here as a kid, but actually it's kind of pretty, the mountains and the scenery. There's lots of water and green everywhere. So it's kind of a just different perspective, as you get older.
Yeah. Well, and you can be a man there, right? Like I was born in hour north of San Francisco, a little town, Santa Rosa, but I lived in Petaluma, and lived there till I was like 6 or 7. And I am so glad I didn't grow up there. I mean, I got family there. I visit, whatever. But in Arkansas, you could have a bonfire in the backyard. You could go shooting with your friends. You could jump in a truck and go tear up a trail. You could do, like, if you wanted to go have some adventures, you could, right? And I have a cousin who's very close to my age, and like we grew up, whatever. And it's just a very different life. Not that, I mean, he's obviously doing very well and totally happy, but I am just very glad that I lived somewhere in the Midwest or the South, as opposed to, California growing up.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in California, but I was exactly the same as Arkansas, to where we had 1,000 people in our town, and it's in the foothills, and Northern California. Yeah. And so it's all, everybody's ranchers or in construction, everybody's got ranches with a bunch of cattle or whatever. So it's very much the same way, to where we were all out. Our fun on the weekends when we got to be 14, 15 was we'd get in a buddy's truck and just leave from his house and be in the woods all night, and doing what kids do in the woods, and crashing trucks and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of fun.
I'm going to flip the script on you then and ask if you know where Mount Lassen is.
Yeah. I mean, relatively, not really, but
So,
way up north.
we had a bunch of cabins up there growing up in the mountains. So we used to go up there and horse around. So good times, man. You know, a little
Yeah,
different than Arkansas. You get like 12 feet of snow and the road would close down in the town of like 100 people. You couldn't get into it, but
exactly. Yeah,
you
we
know,
just got 5 feet of snow in my hometown. You know what I mean? They're doing this last snow in California, and I tell people here in Idaho, I'm like, yeah, we just got way more snow. And they're like, what, in California? I'm like, we don't get any snow here in
there's,
Idaho where I'm at now compared to California where I was from. You
yeah,
know?
there's a lot
Uh,
of California that people don't know about because the cool parts of California kind of keep their mouth shut on social media and they're normal.
yeah,
So people only really hear about the crazy things that go on in California, and those all happen in SoCal or San Francisco. So
that's true. Okay, but back to real
anyway, yeah.
estate.
Anyways, sorry.
Anyways, so you kind of got started pretty quickly. You bought all these different units. I think we could kind of dive into those, but more so to the fact that it's 2021. People have been talking about the economy, for all while Trump was in office. Everybody was talking about the recession going to come and it's going to crash and all this stuff. Uh, Now that we're in this new era, what do you kind of think is going to happen and is going to happen in the future as far as housing prices, investing in real estate, which will lead me to the next part is you just started your, direct to seller marketing and you're still buying as much as ever. So can you kind of touch on that?
Yeah, so I kind of gave up on trying to predict the future after I realized that holy crap, there's no way to predict the future right now. So I'll answer your question, but what I've been telling people is essentially like, look, dude, I have no freaking idea, but I'm buying houses. I'm continuing to buy houses, and what I'm doing is just making sure I get at least 30% equity in the deal, and I budget, very conservatively for vacancy and potential what ifs. Right? I've actually had a 2020 was really freaking good year for me real estate wise. Like I had a dude die, not in my 10 unit, but like if anyone has heard me talk on shows before, you might know that I had a guy die in one of my units 2 years ago, and it cost me like $5,000 between like environmental hazmat cleaning and all this other stuff. So for me to have a guy die in a hospital and just have to clean his stuff out, that's an improvement in 2020. So we're moving the right direction. So I had a much better year 2020 numbers wise than I did 2019, not just because of that, because of a bunch of other stuff. But like my vacancy was not really affected. I really didn't see too much. I mean, there was definitely some stuff, but it's overall pretty good year, not including all the appreciation. So what I kind of came to the terms of was like, look, if I buy a house in the Midwest and I get this thing all in for 70 grand and it's worth 100 and it cash flows $200-300 a month, like I don't really care what happens because the chances of it hitting 30% getting slashed out of the market in somewhere like Missouri is really not that big. I mean, in 2008, we took like a 6%, 5% bust. So like, I'm not super worried about it. If it happens, I mean, if I take a 40% hit on something, or a 50% hit on something, I'm what, 10 grand, 20 grand in the hole? Like I'll ride that out. So I just kind of came to terms with like, look, I'm not going to play the appreciation game because I have no idea what's going on, but I'll keep buying as long as I get a ton of equity and I, cash flow. That being said, to get into kind of my thoughts, I guess, on macro, micro, so I'm stationed in San Diego right now. And so I kind of host a local meetup here and I get to see some of these numbers. And I'll tell you, San Diego is not the only market, obviously, but the whole country is. But San Diego is crazy right now. And to put in perspective, the average like days on market or inventory in San Diego is like 4 months, right? So if you in the country, it's usually like 6 months, I think is kind of the average nationwide. San Diego is usually 4 months. And so what that means for those of you who don't talk inventory terms is if nobody listed another house on the market, right? Nobody listed their home for sale, then it would take 4 months for at the rate of buying for the San Diego to effectively run out of homes that could be purchased, right? And normally it's like six months throughout the nation, like 4 months is kind of average for just San Diego. Right now it's like 30 days in San Diego. So if nobody listed a home, basically everything under contract would just eat the entire pie and there'd be nothing left, right? The amount of homes that would have to drop on the market in San Diego to get it just back to normal is nuts, right? Like you could add, I don't even know, right? Like, so we did the math, right? And there's all these people talking forbearance numbers and foreclosure numbers and all this stuff. And I think it came out to like 3%, right? Like nationwide, the average is like the worst case scenario is like 3% of these homes could drop on the market. And I was talking with my buddy about this. And if that 3% hit in San Diego, like I don't even think it would get us up to normal inventory. And
Mm-hmm.
it definitely wouldn't put us in like an 8-month overload, drop the market type scenario. So that kind of made me think. So there's like 4 market factors that I normally follow on like the market crash, kind of more on the micro side. And I don't follow them nearly as well as I should, but just because I'm here and I don't buy here, so I don't care. But builders permits. When builders permits start being pulled, all right, that's like sign number 1. Well, they're still being pulled. When inventory like plummets, you can't sell a home. Well, you can't keep a home on the market for a week here, so that's not the case. And then interest rates is obviously kind of a fluctuation in there, but the other 2 that I'm totally drawing a blank. Mortgage defaults and foreclosure, right? There's not really any mortgage defaults going on right now because everybody's refinancing to these incredible rates. Foreclosures haven't really hit. So there's not like any major indicators of anything crazy. And then the Fed says they're going to keep the interest rates this low for like 3 years. So I'm kind of like, all right, I don't think interest rates drive the market. I think if the market's starting to drop and interest rates stay low, then it'll drop slowly. But if interest rates spike, it'll drop faster. I think it's more of like a accelerator, decelerator in the market. Anyway, all that to say, I'm by no means Ray Dalio or any kind of expert on economics.
You're not? Are you sure?
Yeah. I've got his book up there, Big Debt Crisis. But I will say that I'm just not. I mean, I'm definitely like, it feels like we're at the peak, right? And it feels like this is a bubble that could burst, and it feels, but the data is not screaming that. And it's a very weird spot to be in. So what I've decided to do is I'm just going to stay out of extremely expensive markets and the appreciation plays and just go, I don't care because I'm buying conservatively. And the caveat that I would say to that is if you're buying into like somewhere like San Diego, for those of you who hear me talk about this, and you can buy a house hack, like, all right, I think that's totally justifiable. I got a buddy out here who owns like $1 million, or a few buddies who own $1 million, multifamilies, where their tenants are covering their mortgage and then they're living in it for free and they're saving their housing allowance. And I'm like, okay, so if the market plummeted, right? If you lost 30% on your home, that's like $300,000 here. Cool. That sucks. But if all your expenses are covered and you're living for free, who cares? Because when it comes back up, which it will eventually, you're going to be fine. And even if it didn't come back up, you're paying down like $40,000 a year in principal. So you'll catch up soon one way or the other. I think that's kind of my advice for people right now. Is like, don't speculate. Buy something that will cash flow, buy something that you can hold on to, and buy something that makes sense in that regard. And then really, who cares? Just hold it for the long term. Don't get, make sure your finances are good that you can do that. And anyway, that's a really long answer for me.
No, that's good.
For me to have prefaced with, I don't know.
No, I think it's perfect because I think one way people can kind of hedge against the thought that there's going to be a correction is, like you said, like maybe don't buy in the super appreciating markets right now, and then kind of lean towards maybe buying out of the area, like long distance investing to areas that, historically don't have big appreciation, and then they don't have big drops either. And then if you want to play the appreciation game, maybe, wait till you're in a financial spot where you can afford to lose the money, or wait for something to change to where you can kind of see these hotter areas or kind of having a price decline a little bit, then get in there. But if you're interested in cash flow, which is more where I'm at in at this stage, maybe start looking abroad, which is the next point I want to touch on, is that you're living in San Diego and you're buying back in Missouri, most all your stuff. Do you have a team back there? You have people that help you run stuff? Like, how did you kind of build out that team? Because I think a lot of people want to go out of state, but they don't know how to quite, if you guys haven't read that David Green's book, Long Distance Real Estate Investing, you might not know how to really like build that team. So how did you go about doing that?
Just through networking. The first move I made was hiring a property manager, and I have friends who do long distance real estate investing and self-manage, and but I also have friends who enjoy, like, I don't know, cutting themselves. I have no idea. Like, that just sounds miserable, right?
Yeah.
No thanks. I wouldn't even manage. I hired a property manager when I lived in the duplex. I was like, I don't want this guy to know I own the house. So, no thanks. But I interviewed 3 or 4 property managers and I found one that fit pretty well. And I actually found a pretty interesting little niche for finding one, but you gotta it's a risk, obviously, but I found a new or newer property manager. She had a lot of experience, but she had just started her own company. She'd been managing for a construction company. And so I got in at like a super low rate when they were new, and they had, I don't pay, I mean, I'm getting a steal for property management for how good they are. And so that was thing number one, right? And I got like a whole list of like 20 questions to ask your property manager if you want to, as you're trying to hire. But uh, I mean, that was great. And I've worked with her now for 4.5, 5 years. So that's been solid. I then basically just continued networking. I've gone through a couple different agents. I've gone through, a crappy contractor. I think I've finally got one that's like good now. He's ironically a freaking friend that I've known for like 6 years and just didn't know that he was in the renovation side of construction because he used to do like high end stuff that wasn't anything I would touch. And I just didn't know that. Like the other day, he sends me a picture of a before and after, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, yeah, it's my house. I'm like, oh, that's cool. You did that? He's like, yeah, that's what we do now. And I was like,
Hey,
you
this something
you
could work out.
like you didn't want to tell me that.
Yeah.
So he's been a property for me Tuesday, and unless he's like outrageous, he'll be my go-to guy for a little while. We'll see how he goes. So that's cool. But I mean, like the agent, so I have this incredible thing going right now with an agent who, he's an investor. He owns he kind of primarily owns self-storage, but he does do a lot of single family stuff, owns a 12 unit. So he's done a little bit of everything. And he and I were talking. I posted on Facebook. It was like, hey, I need someone who wants to learn about real estate who can walk through houses for me. Like, you can walk through houses because I'm not in state. I'll give you a cut. Like, we'll talk something out. And he
You posted on Facebook, like in the local Facebook real estate group, or where
I
did you
literally
post it?
just posted it on my story on my main page. Yeah, I figured there were enough people in that area that somebody would reach out, and I had a decent response. But they were all people who didn't know real estate and wanted to learn, which is fine. I mean, that's what I posted about. And this guy was like, dude, call me. So I call him and he goes, hey, look, here's what I'll do. I'll walk through the property. I'll give you what I would pay you for it today in cash if I wanted to buy it, because he flips houses. And he was like, I'll tell you what you could list it for as is if you wanted to wholesale it. And I'll tell you what it would cost to renovate it and what the after repair value is if you wanted to do that. He's like, all I ask is if you list it, I get the listing and I get first dibs on the cash offer before you hit your buyer's list with it. It's like, okay. And so right now I've got him and one of his, now it's his buyer's agent, Kevin, but the two of them effectively will just, like, I'll send a text. I'll get off the phone with the seller. If it sounds decent, I'll send a text and I'll say, yo, hey, I've introduced Kevin. I've looped him into this text to take a look at address. Kevin, this is so-and-so, he owns this house and would be interested in talking to you. And then they'll walk through and Kevin will text me a million pictures and say, I think this. And then I'm like, awesome. And then I basically send them an offer and say, or I send them sometimes I call, sometimes I don't even have time to call. Like, I literally landed a deal a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, where the guy had said he wanted 65 for this house. And the guy, my guy walked through it. House is in pretty decent shape. And I actually tried to flip a house. I say tried. I had a contractor rob me, but I tried to flip a house on the same street like a year ago. I ended up, getting rid of the house, but I didn't make any money on it. Neighborhood, though, is not bad. That it wasn't a house problem. It was a person problem. And this guy says 65, and he's like, oh, yeah, my agent said 65, but, I'm open to offers. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll give you 50. And he goes, okay. And this was like through a text message. I was like working. I was like, how about 50? I just didn't want to call him and say it because I thought it was going to be like, screw you. And he said yes. So now I'm like, oh, all right. Cool. So then my buddy's going to bid out. It just needs a kitchen bathroom. So my buddy's going to bid it out. ARV's like 105. So I'm like, all right, sweet. This could work very well for me. And but yeah, that's basically my system right now. Is like, if I decide to hold it, I hand it to my property manager. If not, I hand it back to my agent. Right now, he's got 2 that I close Monday, and both of them he's going to list on Tuesday, and I'm just going to flip them. I already gutted one, through some junk guys, and that's my new guy on the team. Is this company called Junk Pirates in my area that is incredible. They removed, like, no joke, 5 hours, and they took out an entire hoarder house and demolished a garage for me. It was
sweet.
incredible. The guy sends me a picture of like a tractor in the backyard. And like, oh my God, what's going on? But I mean, yeah, it's essentially just been referrals. And so I think the biggest thing, people get so tied up in like finding that perfect property manager and finding that perfect agent and finding that perfect whatever, but like just find local investors and
Mm-hmm.
talk to local investors. Like I got my property manager through a whole bunch of interviews. I got my agent through a RIA. I got my contractor through people I know, but the other contractors I've used have been through other investors. I got this junk guy from my agent. I got like everything in my team has basically been a result of telling people what I'm doing and asking people who they know and then
Yeah.
just talking to them. And sometimes people are awesome. Like this junk pirates dude, like there were like 3 or 4 different people that he introduced me to, and it was an immediate like this is going to be my guy forever. And then sometimes you get introduced to like 6 people, and you're like, I don't really know if any of these are all right. I'll test one of them out. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
it's
No,
really
I totally
yeah,
understand what you're saying. So it's more just about talking to people. You got to like start with one, and once you know one or meet one, and they end up being good, you kind of build some good rapport. They'll just introduce you to more people. So, being personable with them, and not trying to be pushy and act like you know more than them. Because you don't. It's not your
yeah.
market. So you mentioned that you're bringing these deals to your buddy and his buyer's agent. Um, which leads me to like, for one, why isn't he getting the deals? Like, why isn't he finding them? And how are you getting these deals?
That's a good question. In fact, I'm actually on my way out of the Marine Corps. I'm doing an internship, and it's going to be with them. And a large part of that is that I'm going to take over a piece of their marketing and just ramp up what I'm doing because I'm bringing them business. So that's kind of the agreement is like, okay, yeah, you can intern with us and also work on your business, but we want you to ramp this up and bring us more stuff. So they do a lot of marketing, but most of what they're doing is typical agent marketing, right? Looking for houses that are worth listing, following up with clients and whatnot. Whereas I'm going after old retiring landlords. And so the cool thing is, I mean, it's hit or miss for whether or not anybody actually calls me, but there have been people that I'm calling with who have like 16 homes. And so, if you find one, like I got to talk to a guy tomorrow. Kevin walked through a house on Friday, and the guy has 6 homes and he's looking to retire. Like, so I think they kind of realize that I'm, somewhat worth the time, just because if he decides to list all 6 of those, that's a pretty good deal for them. I don't necessarily know why they're not doing the direct mail. It's an interesting market because it it's not nearly as saturated as a lot of places,
Mm,
but it's kind of also like it's just not as flashy. I'm literally just, I mean, I've got two funnels right now. I've got text blasting and direct mail, and the text blasting is because my roommate does it. And I'm like, yo, let me use your platform. In fact, like I mentioned right before we started recording this, I was like, hang on. I got to send out 100 text messages. So when we get done talking, I can have some responses to make as opposed to sending them and waiting. Uh, but the direct mail, I love it because it's literally just drop some postcards in the mailbox and hope they come back to you. And it's less about, I think, the type of marketing you're doing and more about having the systems in the back end to kind of handle the marketing, and B, like just being consistent. So I'm specifically, my first batch was targeting like absentee homeowners, but then I've gotten kind of more niche down into like, just basically, your typical list, right? Old person who's owned house for a long time and has lots of equity. Somebody who inherited house from old person who had lots of equity.
mm-hmm.
Going through a divorce. In Springfield, you can pull a dangerous buildings list, and so I can pull a list of all the properties that have uh, city building code violations that are on track. Like the city is mailing them saying, "Hey, fix this crap." So that's another one I'm going to hit this week. And I know that exists because the way that I found out my contractor was screwing me on that property a year ago is because I got a letter from the city saying that my property had made it on this list. And then I got a call from a wholesaler, and I was like, oh, that's nice. I'm glad to know. I was like, what's going on with my property? And then, yeah, anyway. Yeah, so
Yeah.
just kind of pulling some niche stuff like that and then just being consistent. I don't think I'm doing anything special really
Yeah.
at all.
So, and so we could dive into all this stuff, like what niche list, how you're actually getting them, what you're saying on your marketing, but I'm going to dive into that here in the next couple episodes and get real in detail on exactly what we're doing. But I think one question that a lot of investors have is like, or people that haven't worked with wholesalers before or gone out of state is like, well, if the wholesaler is like mailing all these people and they're getting all these good deals, why aren't they just buying them all? Why don't they just keep them for themselves? Like, so you're just going to give me the scraps is like what I hear a lot of times, can you kind of touch on that, or what do you think about that mindset?
I'll tell you that some of the deals I'm wholesaling right now, I should be holding. My personal goal right now is, since I'm leaving the military in the next 6 months, is to pay off any and all debt that is not a mortgage. So I do not have anything. So I have a personal loan that I have out because I tried to flip that house and didn't make money. And when I got my money back, I was so frustrated that instead of paying off said personal loan, I bought a duplex. The duplex was a great investment overall, probably the right idea, but the personal loan is expensive, and I've got it now. I've had it for a year and some change. So my goal is to pay that off, and then pay off my car, pay off my wife's car. Those really aren't that bad a debt, but I figure if I pay off all of that and pay off my HELOC, then that's probably $1,200, $1,300 a month in quote cash flow that I'm saving. And so I know, since I'm leaving my career, I want to have none of that debt, and I want to be running really lean so that my expenses are as low as they can be when I get out. So my goal for this year is to pay off all that debt and have, well, I say 50, but I would like to have $100,000 in operating capital, because right now, several of these deals, I've had to, like, this week, I had to do my first private lending deal where I literally basically went up to my roommate and was like, bro, give me 26 grand. I'll give you 10% interest, and I should only hold the house for like 45 days. But I don't want to be in that position, at least not that often. I want to be in a position where if I want to buy something, I can be like, yeah, cash. And then, I can refinance it later or whatever, instead of having to say, yeah, cash, and then like go find private money, which works fine. But my personal goal right now is to essentially eliminate all that debt and build operating capital so that when I'm out, I have a longer runway, because I know that I'm leaving my career. So I'm literally like, this house that I mentioned that I got for 50, it doesn't really need a kitchen bathroom. Like, it is fine. I could slap some paint on it. I could be all into that thing for 53, maybe 52, and it would be completely rentable, and it's wheelchair accessible. So if I was in this thing for 50, if I did it on a normal loan, which I could, because it would work, I could be in this thing for like 10 grand, and then it'd rent for 700, 750 because it's wheelchair accessible. So that's a decent little deal. I would hold that. I'm actually still torn on whether I'm going to hold it or not, but I think that if I can slap a nice kitchen bathroom in it, I can probably net 20 or 25 off flipping it. So it's like, all right, well, that meets my goals right now more so than the long-term buy and hold, even if this is a good deal. So of the 5 that we got under contract in this first month, there are 2 that I legitimately was thinking about flipping. And there's 2 that I would have bought as a hold and have kind of just given to other people. And the reason is just because of that. Those just don't meet my goal. So, there's definitely this mantra as a wholesaler of like, buy the best, wholesale the rest, as Ryan says. And I definitely love that. So yeah, maybe you're getting some of the wholesaler scraps, but to that, I would basically say, because I'm an asshole, I would say, go find your own deal then.
Yeah.
Figure it
Well,
out.
that exactly. And another thing to think about too is equity doesn't pay the bills. So if somebody's trying to, build a business, or they have different things like you're trying to get out of your career and go like a new career path or something, kind of like the same thing I just did, is like, well, it's great to have all this equity, but at the end of the day, every month you still have bills to come in. And if you're trying to build a business, you got to pay operating expenses and build that capital up. So a lot of people will pass on the deals and send it to their buyers, which they might send it to their key buyers first. And then if you're a new buyer on their list, you're going to get the scraps. Yeah. But you have to work into that, right? You have to build your way up the ladder. So
And
I think there's definitely
one final piece on that, right? Because I think that mentality, that scarcity mentality, is super flawed. Look, a wholesaler won't stay in business if they're making you pay retail. Like, you're still getting a better deal on the house than you would if you were buying it off the market. So, like, pick your poison, but you're going to get a decent deal if you work with a decent wholesaler, even if they got a piece of the pie. Personally, I like the double close because I don't like people knowing. I feel kind of slimy even with wholesaling. Even if I'm only making like 5 grand off it, I feel kind of slimy just personally, because I'm like, ugh, I used to talk smack about that all day long.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of a double close where it's like, yeah, they don't need to know what I made.
Explain to people real quick. What do you mean between the two?
You can do an assignment contract, which basically is like, I've got one sitting over here, but like a piece of paper that says, hey, I'm paying 60 for this house. You're paying 65 for this house. I'm getting the 5 grand. And then you just like go to title and everything closes and everyone's happy and whatever. Or you can do I mean, there's two ways to double close. There's the one where I screwed the pooch on this and I'm closing it on Monday, and then I'm going to sign the contract with the guy and I'm going to end up holding this thing for like 2 or 3 weeks. And that just was kind of weird because the buyer fell in after I was like, there was just not enough time for him to fund. So we're literally anyway, but a true double close is literally like I have a contract, they have a contract, and basically my purchase or my purchase happens, and then like 30 minutes later their close happens. So we're like lined up. Basically, it's like I walk into a room and the seller walks in and they sign and they leave and they get their check and they're happy and they leave. And then the next appointment is the guy buying the house from me and I'm the seller and I sign and he signs and he gives a check and gives a check and I get a check and I leave. So it's just doing like 2 purchases very quickly. But the cool thing is if you have a good title company and they funded like it's basically the same as like a wholesale. Like with the right company, you don't even need to fund it because like, okay, yeah, he signed, you're here, but we already have the money from the other guy. So like, we're just going to use his money, and like they just kind of play that game. So I mean, you could do that, and the difference is that on an assignment contract, they see what you're buying, they see what your spread is. On a double close, they just know what they're buying it from you, and they don't have any. So, like say I'm buying a house for like $3,000 and flipping it for 40. Even if the 40 is a killer deal, like they probably wouldn't be happy about that. I've never seen margins like that, but they probably wouldn't be super happy if you made $37,000, even if they're going to make $40,000 off.
Which
the
is
house.
dumb. That's just a mindset thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's funny. It's kind of like the meme I saw a couple times recently is like you take an investment from somebody or you sell a course for $500 and the person writes to you, okay, well, because I'm giving you $500, like I want all this extra stuff, right? You give me all this XYZ, all these things. And then it says, the next line is like, you sell a course for $500,000. And the guy responds, sweet, go make me some money. Like he doesn't care what you're doing with all the money, right? It's like the mindset thing. The person that's buying a little bit, the small money, they're so scared because they have this small mindset. The guy giving them huge amounts of money is just like, yeah, man, I made the money. Now go make me some more money. So it's kind of just, if you're getting a good deal, just take the deal. Who cares what the other guy's getting? Everybody's got to make their profit. So
yeah, you want your wholesaler to make money so they find you more deals. I want to make money while making friends money. I'm paying more for an audio engineer to work on my audiobook because it's a friend of somebody I know, as opposed to like somebody I was literally like, dude, that's way out of where I wanted the budget to be, but you seem awesome and you're a friend of Nick's, so let's do it. Because ultimately, whatever, like it'll come back around.
That's it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I've got syndicator buddies who have mentioned a few times that like the guys who can only invest so much are the worst people to invest in your deals because it's like it's just that they don't have the money, so they freak out about it. He's like, the guys who will drop a $500,000 check will never ask you again about the property.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, cool, I'm getting my money, thanks. Like,
which
whatever.
I'm not saying I'm not like either one of those guys, or I am, but
yeah,
Grant Cardone said like, don't ever take advice from a millionaire, which is totally true because the only reason they're millionaires because they saved their money. But you want to take advice from the guy that's like far beyond that, because they didn't get there saving it. They got there by making good decisions. So, all right, David. Well, we had tons of good information here. Obviously we didn't dive deep on any one specific topic, but it's kind of a broad overview of which is good, right? Because there's so many different avenues and it's cool hearing your story. But if people have more specific questions for you, where can they reach out to you? How can they find you and get in contact?
The best way to contact me would most likely be just hit me up on Instagram at From Military to Millionaire. And I mean, I respond there better than anywhere else. So,
okay. And then also you have a podcast, and I don't know if you want to mention you got a book coming out, anything else like that?
Yeah. Hashtag worst promoter ever. Yeah. I host the Military Millionaire podcast. We are just encroaching 130 episodes now. So I got some pretty good guests on there, I suppose. Everyone from myself to no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we've had some good guests on there. And then I'm trying to think. Book, that's the other thing. Yeah, so it's called the No BS Guide to Military Life: How to Build Wealth, Get Promoted, and Achieve Greatness. It's basically like if you were joining the military, this is the book that you should be handed and told, like, hey, if you just pay attention to this crap, whether you do 4 years in the military or 40, you'll be totally set up for success when you exit the military. So it's not like get rich quick book. It's more of a, like everything all encompassing and it is more, I mean, there's definitely stuff in it that doesn't apply to military, but I mean, I dig into like how to get promoted faster and what schools you should go to help your career. So it's definitely a military focused book, but there's not a whole lot of guides out there specifically for us. And we have very niche. It's kind of a weird niche because it's like anybody can do, like, we can do everything that anybody else can do, but then we have like some additional benefits like the VA loan and some weird things that are only specific to military. So figured I'd write something that kind of hones in on those and tells people how to use them.
Sweet. All right. Well, yeah, you guys heard it. If you guys have any questions, reach out to him on those platforms. Instagram is the best one. It'll all be in the show notes. So David, man, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, brother. Always a pleasure.
Yeah.